Author Craig Johnson is known for his series of Longmire novels, which follows the activities of Walt Longmire, a sheriff in rural Wyoming. Now, the mystery novels are also the basis of a television series with the same name, and that series is filmed right here in New Mexico. Producer Sarah Gustavus sat down earlier this summer with Craig Johnson to talk about what inspires his characters and what he believes is different about the Western perspective.
Craig Johnson, thanks for sitting down with me.
Thanks, Sarah. My pleasure.
We're glad to have you in New Mexico. I hear you have a New Mexico family connection.
I do have a New Mexico connection, just barely. Look at it, it's on the very east coast of New Mexico. My grandparents used to live in Hobbs, and so it was not that much of a challenge for me whenever I heard that the television show was going to be filmed in New Mexico rather than up in Wyoming, because I've always had a great place in my heart, for New Mexico.
But you do live in Wyoming, and how has living in the West shaped how you approach your work as an author?
Well, I not only live in the West, I live way out in the West. I live in what we euphemistically refer to as the UCLA area. That would be Ucross, Claremont, Leiter, and Arvada out on the Powder River country of Wyoming. And I think if you combine all of those towns together, you'd have a population of about 350. My little town, Ucross, has a population of 25, and that's where my ranch is. And I don't know, I guess, about 12 years ago, whenever I was thinking about, writing this series of books, it seemed like everything at that point in time was all about the CSI stuff. It was all about the forensics and the ballistics and all of that. And I ran into a DCI investigator in Wyoming, and where we have one crime lab in the whole state down in Cheyenne. And I asked him, I said, how long does it take you guys to get DNA evidence? And he paused for a second, and he goes, is this a high-profile case? And I said, well, let's pretend like it's a high-profile case. And he said, about 9 months. And I said, well, that's not really particularly honest than what they're doing in these books and TV show and all that. And he goes, no, it's not really. And so I thought about it, and it seemed to me that a lot of the technology, seemed to kind of rob the stories of the humanity and the place. And so I thought, okay, well, maybe, what you do is maybe do a procedural that takes place in the least populated county in the least populated state in America. And that's how Absaroka County and Walt Longmire was born.
Now, Walt Longmire, he's your central character, the sheriff. He's a very complex man. What lessons do you hope that people would learn from reading about him?
Well, I mean, it's always going to be, whenever you're using that kind of an iconoclastic image, whenever I say a Wyoming sheriff, you're going to get an awful lot of images in your head, and some of them are going to be cliches, stereotypes, and that type of thing. And for me, one of the battles, that you fight when you're writing in that particular genre is to go against the grain, and try and do something a little bit different than what's been done before. And for me, the complexities of that character, the faults of that character. But then again, also the strengths of that character in the sense that, I gave, Walt a couple of abilities, that made him capable. And one of them being he reads. He reads everything, and he remembers it. He also, his office is in a defunct old Carnegie Library back behind the courthouse. The other thing I gave him was a sense of humor. For me, the humor, I think, is a very important aspect of the characters, and I think of the series too, like that both the books and the television series, in the sense that an awful lot of the times, these type of characters are always portrayed as very straight ahead, very no sense of humor whatsoever, like that, and that's a complex part, I think, a component of that complexity that you just mentioned, the fact that they have that humor.
And also his best friend, Henry Standing Bear, a Cheyenne man, he has a real sense of humor.
They do, like that. I mean, my ranch is just to the south of the Northern Cheyenne and the Crow Reservation, and so these are my friends and family and neighbors, and so it's very important that I try and get that kind of thing right. And I don't think that there's ever been a group of individuals that's been more maligned as not having a sense of humor as much as, the American Indian. I mean, they're always portrayed as these cigar store, stoic, kind of characters. And, that's not the Indians that I know. The Indians I know run on about 17 different layers of irony. And if you're not aware of that irony, you get to be the butt of that irony.
And how do you hope that folks outside of the West, maybe on the East Coast, would receive these characters and these stories? Rural communities are often just left out of the conversation entirely.
Well, I think, you touched right on it, right from the get-go there, as far as the complexities of these characters, that they aren't these stock Mayberry, kind of characters, like that these are contemporary individuals living in a contemporary world that, that has a number of challenges, that are a part of their everyday life. But there's also, certain aspects of, a lot of the characters that I want to come through in the sense that there's a decency to them, a strength to them that, in a lot of ways is sometimes missing. I mean, we kind of went through a period in the 1960s where we went, into this, anti-hero kind of phase that's done nothing but kind of, hyper accelerate, here in the last couple of decades to the point where, it's kind of hard to tell the good guys from the bad guys. And so, for me, Walt's a little bit of a throwback, and Henry also, like a little bit of a throwback more to, those Roy Rogers, those Gene Autry kind of characters, and so, even though they're faced with a more complex world, they do have a code that they live by, rules that they live by, and they try and do the right thing. They try and be decent.
Where do you think the Western mystery genre stands today compared to past decades?
Well, I think, there are a number of authors, that are, plying the trade, in this particular geography. And I think that a lot of really good writing is coming out of that. Just the West, as a whole, like there's a lot of really good Western writing going on right now, and there has been. I mean, you can't forget about the authors that came before, the Walter Van Tilburg Clarks, the Jack Schaefers, the Dorothy Johnsons, and then there's no way that I can be here in Albuquerque and not mention Tony Hillerman, who was a great influence on me and a truly marvelous individual.
What lessons did you learn from Tony?
Well, I mean, first of all, like a lot of people forget just how brave Tony was. Tony started up his series, with two Indian protagonists in 1968. And a lot of people don't remember that it wasn't cool to be an Indian in 1968. That was Alcatraz and AIM and a lot of militant stuff going on like that. And so it wasn't popular, within the mainstream culture to be Indian at that point in time. And he made a bold move. It's Wes Studi, I think, that has, I have to credit, for the great line that he has. He said, when I started reading these books, what was great about them is that the two leads were these Tontos, and the Lone Ranger never showed up.
How do you feel about your novels being on the screen in Longmire, the television series, which a lot of people have heard of or maybe even watched?
Well, I've been extraordinarily fortunate, that the people that I've worked with, the producers and the directors and the crews here in New Mexico and the wonderful actors that we have on the show, like that it's really been kind of a quality product that it kind of captures the essence of the books, and continues on. And, especially with what all happened, with the history of the television series. I mean, we were on basic cable with, a basic cable network, for about 3 seasons. And then unexpectedly, we were the highest rated scripted drama that network had ever had, and they suddenly decided to cancel us. And, so you don't take anything for, granted in Hollywood. But then once again, we rose from the grave like that with Netflix. And it's been kind of an amazing ride, I have to admit, but it's been a wonderful group of people to work with. I mean, I was just down on set, in Santa Fe earlier this afternoon, and, it's just an incredibly, charming group of people that, work very, very hard. I mean, Robert Taylor, the guy that plays Walt Longmire, he's pulling like 14, 16-hour days sometimes, to try and get this show on the air. And, Lou Diamond Phillips and all of the others, they knock themselves out, to try and do a good show, because I think they kind of believe in what it is that they're doing.
Do they closely follow the novels?
It kind of goes off and on. I mean, they take bits and pieces. They're on their 53rd episode this year, and I've only written like 11 or 12 books, and so it's kind of hard for them. They kind of have to come up with an awful lot of material on their own. And, they take bits and pieces, and then also, I send them an awful lot of information. One of my favorite things to do, one of the dirty little secrets about my books is an awful lot of the times it's newspaper articles. There'll be newspaper articles in some of these small town newspapers as I'm traveling around Wyoming and Montana, and I'll cut those news clips out and send them down to these guys, because sometimes it won't be exactly right, for a full-length novel, but it might work pretty well, for a teleplay. You never know.
As a plot line. Mm-hmm. Anyone ever criticized you for that? They don't like to see themselves on the show?
I have been really extraordinarily fortunate in the sense that, generally, whenever I use real people in the books, they generally don't mind. It's kind of funny like that because, one of my favorite quotes is from another Western writer, Wallace Stegner, who said, that You know, the greatest piece of fiction ever written is that disclaimer at the beginning of every book that says nobody in this book is based off of anybody alive or dead. You know, what a crock that is. I mean, that's your job, to go find interesting people and populate your books with them. Well, the problem with that, of course, is that the state where I come from only has 500,000 people in it. And so generally everybody knows who I'm talking about.
Now, what about your writing process? What's it like?
I don't know. I'm kind of a working class, blue collar author. I mean, I sit down and I write. I mean, I've got a ranch, and so the old statement is the animals won't wait. So I'm always up before the sun, get everything kind of squared away at the ranch, and then sit down and write. And I've been extraordinarily fortunate in the sense that I really enjoy what I do. And maybe it's because I did so many other things before I finally got to the chance where I could write these books. And fortunate once again in the sense that the only thing that I was hoping to accomplish is that I was hoping I would sell enough books so I could continue writing books. That's all I was shooting for, and we've accomplished that after a short period of time. It's awfully nice, I have to admit.
What about your newest book, The Highwayman? What kind of social or political issues were inspiring you when you wrote that one?
A lot of it deals with psychological issues that a lot of law enforcement and a lot of military, PTSD. A lot of those things. It kind of touches back on what we were talking about before as far as the characters having a sense of humor. If you talk to anybody, in the military or law enforcement, if you offer them a bulletproof vest or a sense of humor, they'll take the sense of humor if they know what's good for them. I mean, anybody that has a difficult job knows that you kind of have to keep your sense of humor, because you get to the end of the day, you're either going to be crying or you're going to be laughing. And you hope that it'll be the laughing part. And in this particular novel, what happens is there's a highway patrolman who is transferred to a specific area in Wyoming, the Wind River Canyon, right in the heart of Wyoming, right above the Wind River Reservation. And it's about about 30 miles long with these 2,500 foot granite canyons on either side, and a grade 5 rapids, white water river running through the middle of it. And the old timers used to call it no man's land, because when the highway patrolman would go into the canyon, you wouldn't hear from them again until they came out the other end of the canyon. And this highway patrolman gets transferred there, and she's there for a couple of weeks, and all of a sudden she starts getting these 1078 calls. 1078 officer needs assistance. And the problem being that these 1078 calls are coming from a legendary Arapaho highway patrolman by the name of Bobby Womack, who died in a crash in the canyon in 1979. And they try and get her to go in for some psychological evaluation, and instead she calls up Walton Henry and says, "Hey, I need some help."
Fascinating. Now, one of the things that we've been talking about here in New Mexico is our rural communities, young people leaving for economic opportunity. What do you think is lost in the western U.S. if young people are leaving, if they're not finding a way to make a living and stay in those communities?
Well, it's always going to be an ebb and a flow. It's always going to be a flux, of people going out and then people coming in, because there's always going to be that wonderful attraction of open space, and I think there's always going to be that sensibilities of of human beings that want to go out into that open space. When I'm over here on I-25 trying to get here to the studio and I'm backed up and have cars all around me, all I'm thinking about is that distance out there as I'm looking at those beautiful mountains off in the distance away from Albuquerque. So I think that there's an attraction in either way, but an awful lot of it has to come down to the economics of the situation. I mean, you always have to be able to find a way to pay the bills, and I think we'll see a settlement in that slowly but surely. It'll flow in one direction and then the next.
Craig, thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.